Back in the 1960s, an Oregon track athlete named Phil Knight believed running shoes could be made better and cheaper than what American companies were selling. At the time, German brands like Adidas and Puma dominated the athletic world. Japanese shoe companies were beginning to rise, and most American made athletic shoes were considered bulky and outdated. Phil Knight partnered with his former track coach, Bill Bowerman. Bowerman was obsessed with performance. He would literally tear apart shoes, trying to make runners faster. Together, they started importing shoes from a Japanese company called Onitsuka Tiger. At first, they didn't even have a store. Phil Knight sold shoes out of the trunk of his car at track meets. That company was called Blue Ribbon Sports, and honestly, it barely looked like the beginning of a billion-dollar empire. But Bowerman kept experimenting. One of the most famous stories is that he poured rubber into his wife's waffle iron, trying to invent a better running sole. And somehow, that strange waffle pattern became one of Nike's earliest innovations. Then came the split. Blue Ribbon Sports eventually separated from Onitsuka Tiger. Now they needed a completely new brand, a new name, a new identity, a new logo. The name Nike came from the Greek goddess of victory. The logo? That famous swoosh was created in 1971 by a graphic design student named Carolyn Davidson. She was reportedly paid around $35 for designing it. $35. Imagine accidentally creating one of the most recognized logos in human history for less than the cost of modern sneakers. To be fair, years later, Nike gave her stock and recognition after the company exploded in value. But still, that story alone became legendary. Nike officially launched in the early 1970s, and timing mattered, because suddenly, America became obsessed with jogging. Running exploded into mainstream culture. Nike was ready for it. The company pushed lightweight performance shoes right as fitness culture started taking over suburban America. But Nike didn't truly become Nike until they figured out something massive. People weren't just buying shoes, they were buying identity. Nike realized a sneaker could mean status, confidence, rebellion, success, and nobody represented that better than Michael Jordan. In 1984, Nike signed a young NBA rookie who many people thought would be good, but nobody fully understood what was about to happen. Michael Jordan changed everything. The Air Jordan line became more than basketball shoes. They became cultural weapons. Kids wanted them. Collectors chased them. Entire fashion trends formed around them. And Nike transformed from a sports company into a lifestyle empire. The marketing became legendary. Just do it. 3 words, simple, aggressive, motivational. One of the most effective advertising slogans ever created. Nike commercials weren't really about shoes anymore. They were about emotion, victory, pain, determination, failure, comebacks. Nike sold inspiration, and it worked unbelievably well. By the 1990s, Nike was dominating global sports culture, but as the company grew, so did the criticism. Investigations began exposing harsh factory conditions in overseas manufacturing plants. Many Nike products were being made in countries where labor was dramatically cheaper. Workers in places like Indonesia, Vietnam, and China were reportedly being paid extremely low wages, while producing products sold for massive profits in Western countries. Then came one of the biggest accusations: child labor. Reports surfaced alleging that children were involved in parts of Nike's manufacturing supply chain. Images and documentaries spread worldwide, and suddenly the company famous for inspiration and empowerment was facing accusations of exploitation. Nike became one of the biggest public examples of globalization criticism in the 1990s. Protests erupted. College students boycotted products. Activists accused Nike of profiting from poverty, and the damage to the company's image was serious. Phil Knight initially resisted some of the criticism publicly, but eventually Nike was forced to respond. The company began increasing factory inspections, publishing reports, and creating labor monitoring programs. Nike also became more transparent about where products were manufactured. Now, depending on who you ask, this is where opinions split hard. Some people argue Nike improved conditions significantly over time and became a model for supply chain oversight. Others argue the changes happened only after public outrage threatened profits. And honestly, both arguments have points, because Nike helped create the modern celebrity brand machine, but also became one of the biggest cautionary tales about global manufacturing. And the controversies didn't stop there. Over the years, Nike faced criticism over worker pay, factory conditions, aggressive marketing tactics, and consumerism itself. There were also debates over sneaker culture becoming extreme. Limited releases created frenzy buying. Some shoes sold out in minutes. Resellers began flipping sneakers for absurd prices. People camped outside stores overnight. Some robberies and violent incidents were even connected to expensive sneaker demand. Think about that for a second. A product originally meant for running somehow became valuable enough to trigger crime. That's not just fashion anymore. That's cultural power. Then came another major shift. Nike leaned heavily into social and political messaging. Some consumers praised the company for taking public stances. Others accused Nike of performative activism while still relying on overseas labor systems. Again, opinions split hard depending on perspective. But one thing is undeniable. Nike understands attention better than almost any company alive. Love them or hate them, they stay relevant. And financially, the numbers became staggering. Nike evolved into a corporation worth tens of billions of dollars. The swoosh became larger than sports itself. It entered music, movies, streetwear, social media, and global pop culture. And today, sneaker collecting is practically its own economy. Some limited shoes sell for thousands. Rare pairs sell for far more. There are people who treat sneakers like stock portfolios, which honestly would sound insane to someone from the 1960s watching Phil Knight sell shoes out of a trunk. But maybe that's the entire story of Nike. It's the story of how a basic athletic product became mythology, a company that mastered aspiration. Nike convinced millions of people that shoes weren't just products, they were symbols of athleticism, status, coolness, motivation, success, and that may be the company's greatest achievement of all. Not the shoes, not the slogans, not even the athletes, the psychology. Because even people who know the controversies, even people who criticize the company, still buy the shoes. That's power. Nike helped define modern branding itself. A company born from track meets and waffle irons became a global giant recognized almost everywhere on Earth. And decades later, that little swoosh still works.